I'm going to switch to my selection tool. I want to change the size of my elements. So I'm going to go back to my Properties Inspector while my list box is still selected, scroll down to the text property, and increase my font size. There we go. Now I want to modify the item template. I'm going to right-click my list box and edit the item template. Now if you look, the item template is displaying that I only have one text block inside of it. Now let's see what we can do with that. I want to right-click my text block, and I want to group it into a border. I want to have a little bit more visual flair for how this looks. I'm going to take my border and set some of its properties. I'm going to modify the appearance and give it a border thickness on the left and top. I'm going to set the quarter radius on the first coordinate to 3, which you still can't see because by default a border has got a null brush. Let me expand my brushes and give my border brush a color. Now each of my elements has got this kind of black border around it, and I can change that to something a little more dramatic if I want. Maybe something going from black to green. Now my elements inside, the banana and the grapefruit text are looking kind of pushed against the edges, which means that my border isn't sizing itself to as big as it needs to be. I'm going to set the width and height on my border elements to automatic, so they'll also change their size as the element inside them changes. My grapefruit is also pretty close to the grapefruit in the next column, so I'm going to add a little bit of padding between them to space everything out a little bit better. I can also add a little bit of bottom padding, so now as my text gets entered, they're going to be displayed with this nice little border region and divided up around on the screen. Now, let's say I want to make it look even a little more dramatic. Let's rotate that text a little bit. I'm going to move down to my transform category and expand it. Now, one of the questions I get asked quite frequently is what is the difference between a render transform and the layout transform? The two boxes look virtually identical, so how do they behave differently? The difference between the two is based on when the bounding box for the element is measured. Let me show you. I'm going to go to my object tree, and I'm going to select the text block itself. Now, if I modify the render transform, the place where my text block is located is not going to change. It's just going to be rotated just before it gets positioned. So nothing else is modified as I change that value. I'm going to press Ctrl-Z to undo that, but now watch when I modify the layout transform. When I change the layout transform, it's going to rotate it and then calculate where the bounding box is. So the borders are going to change their size based on the newly rotated text. So now I've rotated my text a little bit, the border and everything relays out to fit it. If you want the layout engine to take the transform into account, use a layout transform. If you want the layout engine to do its work and then apply the transform afterwards, that's when you use a render transform. Now that I've got everything how I like it, I'm going to scope back up to the top. I'm going to make this a little bit taller, and it's time to test how our game actually looks. Press F5 to test the application, and now, by default, everything is set up this way. Let's start my new game. My text swings around, my timer is started, and as I type things in here,
very good.
I hear my audio, I see my words getting put into the box, I see my timer counting down, and I see my score showing me the number that I wanted to display. All of these pieces now collect together to give your user the experience that you're setting out to have. At this point, there's still a few more things that we can clean up. Like for instance, the title bar of our application still says Window 1. The menu needs just a little bit of work to finish it up. But right now, you should have a pretty good idea of some of the things that you can do to bring the visual flair of your applications out. From here, Now, the designer can go ahead and add more functionality, more colors, more changes, more transitions, using these same concepts to bring even more of the visual flair and really bring this application out into something that's going to jump out and grab your user.